Welcome to the 4th ASEAN EU Cooperation and Scholarship Day. You are now in the reception area. Here is the list of events we have prepared for you. Click on the schedule button to get a reminder on your phone or devices. Just dropping in to see what's on? Find this little red button to see which event is currently live and just join the fun. Take the time to explore the expo area and see what have been prepared for you. Here on the booth panel, you can have a one-on-one Q&A session with our exhibitors. Download all the information that interests you, join workshops and sessions, or try out the games. Each session also has its own booth panel for you to interact with the speakers. To have a conversation with an expo representative, click Share Video and Audio. The booth moderator will allow you to have a conversation with them. Have something to say? Head on over to the Voice of Youth booth. Pick your virtual background and overlay and say it with a photo or video. Don't forget to follow and tag at EU in ASEAN when you post it on social media. You might be the lucky winner to get a special hamper from the EU. We're so excited to have you here, and we wish you a good time.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to the 4th ASEAN EU Cooperation and Scholarship Day 2021. I'm Agnes Rahajin, and I'm very excited to be your moderator today. We will be discussing a very important topic about women and girls and how issues about gender equality and protecting women aren't just a women's issue, but it's also an issue that should be concerned by everyone. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our amazing speakers today, all the way from Thailand, Singapore, and Malaysia. First of all, we have Ratna Matailuk from Safe and Fair, which is an EU-funded program that focuses on the protection of women migrant workers, specifically in ASEAN. Hi, Ratna, how are you?
Hi, Agnes. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So next we have Vivian Lim, the co-founder of Women in Asia, which is an online community that helps amplify perspectives from Asia. So it helps bridge cultural and gender differences. Vivian is also the co-curator at TEDx Singapore. Hi, Vivian.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for being here. And finally, we have Celeste Chung, who founded her first nonprofit charity organization at the age of 15. Her nonprofit is called Youth for the Future and is now supporting 300 kids to school and has impacted over 4,000 girls internationally. She's also president of Girl Up, a UN initiative, and also part of the International Women Network team. That's amazing. Hello, Celeste.
Hi, how everyone? I hope everyone's doing well wherever you are, and thanks for tuning in. Yeah.
Yes, I hope you're doing healthy too. Okay, so thank you, speakers, and thank you for everyone who has tuned in this session. Throughout the session, if you have any questions for any of the speakers, feel free to drop your question in the chat box under the Q&A. So at the end of the session, I will read it out to the speakers to answer. Okay, so let's get right into it. First, I'd like to start with Celeste. So you started your first nonprofit at the age of 15. I just want to know what inspired you to do that, what inspired you to start Youth for the Future, because at 15, I probably was still struggling with homework.
Yeah, to be honest, I get this question a lot, and I think there are like lots of factors that comes into play when answering this question. But I think one epiphany that I had was that when I was like doing an internship when I was 14, one of the colleagues asked me what I wanted to do in the future, and I was pretty ambitious back then. So naturally, I said I wanted to change the world, and of course, the office laughed a bit, and the colleague then replied with, maybe you should pick something like more safe, leave that for the adults, focus on like taking care of your family or something like that. And immediately that angered me because in 2019, I couldn't believe that I was still a part of this sexist co-working environment where we're not lifting each other up, but actually diminishing each other's goals and accomplishments. And so I realized that I wanted to do something, I wanted to show younger generation and younger girls that they could do something too. And so I realized the key towards that is women empowerment. And how do I accomplish women empowerment? And it all came down to one thing: education. Education is the biggest barrier all younger girls face, but it's one that once you've accomplished it, it opens so many doors for you. So I realized I wanted to help my community out, empower the young girls, and balance the gender gap in education. And so from there, I started Youth for the Future. And the name itself actually came from the fact that 25% of our population are youth, but we are 100% of the population. So yeah, that's basically what inspired me.
That's amazing. And it's so great because at the age of 15, obviously people will laugh at you and like, what? You're only 15. You're just a teenager. You can't do anything about the world. And it's so inspiring that you had the epiphany at only 14 and you want to change the world. And this only proves, and like, you're a living example of, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how young you are. If you want to change the world and if you set your mind to it, it's definitely possible. And it's very important, especially as you said, education is like the core, and it opens so many opportunities for women because it's one of the platforms that really empowers women, and it's really important that we really focus on education for young girls, for young women to have these opportunities. So speaking of women, the next question I would like to ask is for Vivian. You work in bringing the Asian perspective to bridge cultural and gender differences, right? So when did you first notice this gap, and why do you think it's very important to bridge?
So I think it's pretty much similar to Celeste as well. It always starts with us talking to, a group of your tribe, your community. So I've been in community building for the last 10 years. When I was in undergrad, it all started with having conversations, just like Celeste, with coworkers, with friends, with basically all the student community. And what we discovered was, there were certain things that we were uncomfortable about, right, when it comes to women-related issues or women empowerment issues. So that was that really sparked the entire journey for us at Women in Asia. So my co-founder and I was like, when we were talking to not just local Singaporeans, but also people in the region through our TEDx connection, and we start uncovering that, like, hey, this was similar experiences and situations that we're faced. So that was how we decided to, hey, why don't let's plan for most of such conversations and have a safe space for such discussions to go on, right? And what we feel is that for such discussions to make sense and create an impact, it is not just to understand from women or girls, but it's to also open up, right, and involve the male community in it, right? That's why for Women in Asia, we say that it's a community that's beyond gender differences. Accepting that there are gender differences, right? But what we are very curious and very motivated to talk about is how can we bridge this, right? Understanding their differences on issues like women in STEM or exploitation issues. I think the next step forward that our community wants to create is what can we do better, not just in a little women huddle group, but as a wider community, invite the men in, invite stakeholders in, invite policymakers, invite institutes, and everyone to have this open discussion on, like, here's a problem, and ideate together how else do you think we can move forward to build a better and more inclusive future for all of us. So that was sort of our journey. It didn't start with maybe it was a slightly bit different from Celeste. We wanted to change the world, but it was really one conversation at a time. That was why we went on the route of understanding and showcasing more of such Asian perspectives in the region, in order to bridge all these differences and see how we can all work together to create something, or like a middle ground that all of us can accept, and grow towards. Yeah, that's sort of our journey.
That's a beautiful thing, and how you, just from a conversation to conversation, you can build this community where it doesn't only involve women, but it also involves men. And it's a community that, as you said before, it's not, it doesn't matter what gender you are. If there's a problem, we gather to have conversations about it, and how can we change it? Yes, there are gender differences, but how can we bridge that? And that's such an amazing thing that you do. And speaking of community and platforms or programs that cater to women and cater to help gender equality, this brings me to my next question for Ratna. So can you share with us what exactly Safe and Fair program is?
Right. Well, in a nutshell, the Safe and Fair program is a joint ILO and UN Women program which seeks to realize the rights and opportunities for women migrant workers in ASEAN. And we're doing this in collaboration with another UN agency, UNODC. And this is done under the larger EU and UN Spotlight Initiative, which seeks to eliminate violence against women and girls globally. So within the Spotlight Initiative framework, which seeks to address violence against women and girls across the world, Safe and Fair is focused exclusively on addressing violence against women migrant workers in Southeast Asia. And we do this by making labor migration frameworks more gender responsive, improving services for women migrant workers, producing data and evidence on the experiences of women migrant workers, and also campaigning to generate a better understanding of the contributions that women migrant workers in this region are making both to their economies and societies, both in the countries of origin and also in the countries of destination.
I see. Wow. So can you share with us what exactly are the main issues facing women migrant workers in ASEAN, especially because of the pandemic? I can imagine it must have highly affected them.
You're right. The pandemic has affected, I mean, not just women migrant workers, but all of us. But I'd like to start with just saying that very briefly, if you think of migrant workers in ASEAN, there are approximately 10 million migrant workers in this region, of whom 50% are women. And I would say that when we think of women migrant workers, we should understand that migration can be actually a very positive thing, right? We talk a lot about the social and economic benefits to the countries of origin and the countries of destination who benefit from the work of migrant workers. But even migration for individuals can be a journey of empowerment and personal growth. So instead of creating a laundry list of the issues that women migrant workers face in this region, I just want to highlight the factors that can have a negative impact on the experience for women migrant workers. And a lot of these issues have been exacerbated by COVID-19. So for example, one of the key factors of discrimination and violence that women migrant workers face is based on gender. So gender-based violence and discrimination, we're thinking of the stereotypes and the discrimination that all persons who identify as women can perhaps relate to. And compounding to that is the migrant status of women migrant workers. So for example, you must have heard stories of xenophobia. We know there are issues of language in countries of destination. There's isolation from support networks for women migrant workers. And again, in the context of COVID-19, for example, when in countries of destination, information has been provided about how to keep safe during COVID, this could perhaps be information that is not accessible to women migrant workers, just because they're not able to, maybe they can speak the language, but perhaps they can't read the information online, or they don't have access to the services that they should be able to get. They can't access services because of the lockdowns and restrictions that are in place. Also, it's important to remember that not all categories of migrants are treated the same. So it really much depends on what kind of visa they hold. So for example, women migrant workers, especially the migrant domestic workers, they might already have faced restrictions on their movement or their ability to change jobs, or they might be excluded from certain services in countries of destination. And again, all of these things have been compounded during COVID. And finally, I'd also like to raise the issue of that, it is also the nature of work that many women migrant workers find themselves in. Especially in ASEAN, a large share of migrant workers, especially women, they're engaged in low-paid and informal work sectors. So if you can think of domestic work, care work, agriculture, construction, services, many of these sectors are underregulated. Or in the case of domestic work, they're not even covered by employment laws. So whenever there is any violation of rights, for example, if their salaries are not paid on time, or if they're experiencing violence or harassment by employers, women migrant workers don't actually have any recourse to justice or any recourse to getting access to support services to complain about their employers or to even change employers in many cases. So this is kind of discrimination and violence that women migrant workers face based on gender, migrant status, and work sectors. These are all interlinked. And these have also been issues that have kind of brought to light by the COVID-19 pandemic.
I see. So actually, there's a lot of layers when it comes to migrant workers, but in general, women are most vulnerable to gender-based violence, and that's horrible. And like knowing that women migrant workers are more vulnerable to abuse or exploitation, etc., programs like Safe and Fair are crucial to ensure their safety and their protection, right? So again, talking about community, I'd also like to go back to question for Vivian. So can you share with us an example of what you do with your community to actually start the conversation, and how do you actually bring people together from different experiences?
So, I guess like what right now I was saying, all these undercurrent that's happening to the low income, women. There's, for example, in Singapore, we do have a large community of them who are domestic workers. So because of all these stories, they are not often always in the front covers of our news, right? The general public may not have all these domain knowledge or in-depth information about what really goes on. So I think the problem that, as our organization, Women in Asia, is trying to bridge is really sharing all these perspectives and narratives and bridging it to tell the bigger community, right? Hey, this happens. This is that's happening on the ground. Because a lot of times it's, of course, there's that small portion that, maybe we're trying to be idealistic, thinking that it's not that people don't care, it's just that they don't know how to care, and there isn't enough means. And, just as how Rana was saying, the migrant community, they don't have access to the kind of language that we use, like Singapore traditionally is still English for a lot of the things. Similarly, we do not understand the language as well. So I think what the role we play is to do our best to be that bridge, to share their stories, and then share all these resources and plan campaigns that we can help them with. So when at the start of the pandemic, what we did, it wasn't just for the female migrant community. We actually did a whole hygiene awareness campaign outreach. This was at the start of the pandemic because we also felt that, they will be a very, very vulnerable group, and the pandemic has impacted them a lot more. So what we did was, getting the help of volunteers to come together and translate some of these materials, outreach them using the channels that they're familiar with. So if we, for example, if the community is on Facebook, then it's Facebook. If it's just via WhatsApp, we would record messages on WhatsApp and disseminate. And then we actually did 2 outreach campaigns to go down to public areas where they would typically go to on their off days for Singapore, and distribute small flyers and work with ground communities like this. So this was something that we did during the pandemic. It's really our part to connect as much as possible and to shed light, to tell the wider community, this is really just a very, very small thing that we did. But our hopes is really to let more people in Singapore and in the region know, like, hey, this is a marginalized community. If anything were to happen, they would be most vulnerable in such a pandemic situation. So same thing as before the pandemic, there was this story of a domestic worker, domestic helper that was in Singapore that we found her story. So she was working in Singapore for over 10 years. And what happened was her employer sent her for classes on education, like what Celeste was talking about. So, and she decided to, start her own tea business. So what we did was really uncover all these narratives, put it into a nice story, into a story, and share with the wider community, saying that, like, hey, these are things, and sharing different facets of different journeys of these women on the ground. So to allow that deeper understanding and, the community to like, oh, okay, these are things that can happen, right? These are different trajectories that we can support our migrant communities in. So like to me, that's really, what we're striving to do. Of course, it's very different line of work from Celeste and Ratna, but for us, it's like, we're helping to really uncover all these narratives and hopefully get to more people, and more people can volunteer their resources to help them. Yeah.
Yes, and I feel like it's really beautiful how you and Ratna and Celeste, you guys all have different platforms, but essentially you all fight for women empowerment, you all fight for gender equality. And as you said before, because there's a problem and people acknowledge that there's a problem, but they don't know how to solve that problem. And I feel like it's very important with what you do that you have these conversations, you write these stories, you share these stories, and it helps give a better understanding about each other and how they live their lives and what can we do to help and what's possible, like the story that you shared about her making her own tea bag. I think that's really amazing because through these stories, other people can actually see like, oh, okay, I can do this, and like it's very inspiring for others to share as well. So, like Vivian and Ratna, do you also experience working with migrant workers, Celeste?
Hi.
Is it one of the issues that you work on as well?
Yeah, definitely. But we work with kids instead, because we're focusing on schools. So right now we just launched our like newest school, but we're currently organizing 3 schools around the city, and we're actually impacting like 10,000 kids so far. So it is a rise, but yeah,
Wow, that's
it's really
amazing.
crazy. I think one of our main program is focused towards the girls, and it's called My Body. And what My Body program is about, it's where we come together once a week for an hour to two, because we found that if we prolong those hours, the kids tend to lose focus. So we keep it around 1 to 2 hours. And what we're talking about is we're highlighting the importance of safe sex and the importance of education tying in with it too. Because what we realized is about 20% of the girls between age 10 to 14 will drop out of our schools. Even though we've made our school free and accessible to all the kids, they will still drop out, the girls especially. That's because they're sort of stuck in the cycle of poverty and believe that the only way they can support themselves is by marriage. And so we really taught them that in this lesson, in this program, we taught them that they have a choice. Like by going to school, you're opening so much more choices for yourself. It's your body is not just for childbearing. It is, you can do so many amazing, wonderful things if you put your mind into it. And so we're really highlighting the fact that you don't have to be a mother. You can if you want, but we're highlighting the fact that you can do so much more. You don't need to support the man in your family, and that if you just finish like your high school education, you get a career, you can get a job. And that's what we're really highlighting: safe sex, the use of condoms, and just stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes, and I totally agree that it definitely should start young. It really roots in our education, especially for young girls, because from a very young age, I believe many cultures, many cultures teach their girls that, oh, you don't have to go to a higher education. It's okay. You'll just marry rich, and like you'll just have your husband provide for you, and you'll just be in the kitchen and take care of the kids. But it's very important for us to have the responsibility to tell these young girls that you can do so much more. You can do anything you want. Literally, you don't need to, there's no obligation for you to marry. There's no obligation for you to have children. But if you wish to do so, that's a beautiful thing as well. But the thing that we need to remind them is that they have a choice to do whatever they want, regardless of their gender. And especially, it really needs to start young, because even in schools, even teachers will be like, oh, because you're just a girl, you don't really need to be really good in academics. You don't need to aim high for schools. You don't need to change the world. Leave that to adults,
Yeah.
leave that to men. And I feel like that's a discussion that's really important for us to keep reminding ourselves and keep reminding little girls and little children that they are so much more than what people tell them, and they can do so much more, and they can change the world like you. So this will be the last question for me. This is for all speakers. What do you see is the main issue that ASEAN women face right now, and probably how can we be part of the solution? Probably Ratna can go first.
Happy to go first. So in terms of the issues or the key main issues facing all women right now in ASEAN, including women migrant workers, is this, for me at least, I would see this as there's been such an increase in gender-based violence and gender-based discrimination against women. So violence against women is a form of gender-based violence. And I think that is pretty key here, because you see suddenly an increase in the need for services, but also there's a limitation in access to services. So I think, especially for all of us, and the kind of roles that we can play in addressing this would be perhaps to counter some of these negative stereotypes in gender and some of these negative stereotypes that we hear in migrant workers. And it's so fantastic to hear the examples that Vivian and Celeste have been sharing about, the campaigns in Singapore and also the work with school children encountering violence against women and girls. For Safe and Fair, I would welcome all of you to go stop by our booth. We have colleagues who are there right now and who will be happy to share more information about the work we're doing.
Yes, you definitely should.
And definitely yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead, Agnes. I think I'll stop there.
So how about you, Vivian? How can we be part of the solution?
I think we are in a very interesting intersection right now as ASEAN. Of course, with education, our younger generation are getting more and more woke, right? They understand gender-based violence, they understand gender stereotypes, right? They understand and know that the things that they face about sexual jokes, like I saw someone asking in the question, right? Those are not right. But it's interesting because we are not like the US economies or European economies where it's open, right? You can just walk up to the streets or you can say those things in public, right? Striking a balance with the whole cultural nuances that our community have grown up in, right? The family, social structures, and all these cultural nuances. So I think what's most crucial it is to balance it. That's why, for movements like Me Too or even Lean In, right? If we just copy and paste it over, even in Singapore, like it's a supposedly urbanized community, it doesn't work like 100%, doesn't work exactly. And I think that is the challenge, but also poses as an opportunity for us as ASEAN, because, we realize that we can't just copy and paste, right? We need to contextualize, we need to understand all these little gender social structures, and then work around all that to find, what is the best balance for our own communities. So the solutions that, I feel that we need to, can do is really to look at your own local communities, in your schools, in your communities, and ask yourselves and develop your own solutions. It's not just like looking at Singapore or like Malaysia and say like, okay, that's the right model. But for ASEAN, it's really to look internally and then come together as a women tribe and men tribe, invite the men in and invite the family stakeholders in to decide, this is what equality looks like for us in the next couple of years, and we are okay. And this is what equality will look like in the next 10 years for our children. And we are okay with it and we will work together. Instead of just like taking something out of another culture and saying that, okay, that's the golden standard. So to me, that's what I feel we can do to really support local voices, dig deeper in all these local communities to uncover more of such narratives and listen on the ground. Yeah, that's my take.
Yes, I agree 100%. So actually, this might relate to one of the Q&A, one of the questions that the audience has given from, this is actually for you too. Do you think women in Asia have unique challenges compared to women in other parts of the world?
I think definitely, for sure, like what Celeste was mentioning, right? Things like childbearing, the family social structure, we can't run away in ASEAN. It's deeply rooted in a lot of heritage and culture. And this is a challenge. It is not wrong or right, but I feel that it is a challenge that the newer generation needs to come together with the older generation to decide what is most relevant right now. And in this landscape, what is relevant right now? Whatever was relevant 10 years ago, the younger generation needs to acknowledge that it may not work 100% anymore. But at the same time, it doesn't mean to do a different tangent, because the older generation may not be ready to accept that as well. So I think, it's coming to that middle ground. But oftentimes, when we struggle with like the feminism movement or the gender equality movement, I feel that we are always fighting for like polarity. It's extreme ends. Right, but I feel that for ASEAN, it may not have to become like that. It may be like that in the future, but it needs to take baby steps towards bridging that.
It takes time, it takes progress.
It takes time, exactly. The gender movement have only started in ASEAN way later than the other communities. There's so much to learn from what EU has been doing, but we need to acknowledge that we can't be like that in the next year. We have to take baby steps.
100%, and especially because it started very later on, we need to acknowledge that it takes baby steps, it takes time, and discussions like this is very helpful in pushing these issues. And there's another question to Ratna. Has the pandemic hindered your work in protecting women migrant workers, and what do you do about it? And maybe you can keep it short and simple. I'm sorry, we're running out of time. I wish we can have this discussion forever.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And I can see my colleague Yene has also responded in the chat. Certainly, the pandemic has affected the way we work and the kind of work we're doing. Suddenly, we had to focus a lot more in providing pandemic-related support to women migrant workers across all the countries that we work in. So we do a lot more support. We provide a lot more support to some of our partners on the ground who are working directly with the communities of women migrant workers. So there's certainly been a pivot there in how we are providing some of the services that we're doing or creating some of the data that we have. What's also interesting is now we factor COVID-19 a lot into the kind of research that we're doing. So for example, last year, we had been doing studies on what is public opinion or what is the popular perceptions about migrant work, especially looking at 4 countries of destination in Asia. And there is a lot of increase of xenophobic attitudes towards migrant workers, which is very unfortunate, but it's also something that you can also see in the press and how there are stories being reported on women migrant workers and even migrant workers in general. So there is definitely increasing challenges that we are facing, but not something that is that cannot be overcome, I feel. And you always have to be positive, and you always have to try to look for for the future and try to do things better. But also because of the pandemic, there's also a lot of attention now on the issues facing women migrant workers. So in a way, there is also that. So you can actually use the pandemic to also bring attention to these larger issues that will affect all of us, and not only women migrant workers.
Yes, certainly there are challenges, and I'm so happy that you can try to overcome that or see the silver lining, and you have to focus on the solution rather than just keep focusing on the problem. You have to pick yourself up and find what you can do about it. So maybe this can be the final question for Celeste. This is from Faith Yo. A few seconds ago, I'm a university undergrad from Malaysia, and she asked, are there any volunteer programs or campaigns that he or she can participate in because they're really interested?
Oh my God, great question. Because we're always talking about, like what you said, we're always talking about the issue, but how can we help out? That's the main goal. So I do know that there are a lot of organizations right now that are asking for volunteers. I'm not sure where I can plug in like their socials, but I do know like Neo, you can find them on Instagram. They have a spreadsheet of all the organizations in Malaysia who are looking for volunteers. And I do know if you are interested, a little plug, but if you are interested in getting involved with women empowerment, you can definitely start your own Girl Up chapter in your own university and lead it from there. And basically, Girl Up will provide you with all the resources you need to lead your club. And there are lots, in terms of gender equality, there are lots of minor factors in it. So there's women in sports, women in STEM, there's women empowerment, and you can pick one and focus on that. So Girl Up is definitely my place to go, and I highly recommend it for everyone who's looking forward or wanting to help out. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's so nice that you're actually helping them to be equipped with everything they need. And that's really important, because often people have ideas, people have goals, but they don't really have the things that they need. And it's great that you can provide that for them. So yeah, keep that noted and just do your research. Okay, so I'm so sorry that I feel like I have to wrap it up soon. I wish I could talk to you guys forever, because I've been learning so much and it's so inspiring. But for those who'd like to know more about the Safe and Fair program, you can continue the discussion with Ratna. Head over to their booth in the expo section, and you can read through the information, fact sheets, and have a live Q&A at the booth. And we also invite you to have your say at the Voice of Youth booth. You can tag @EU in ASEAN on your social media channels and share your thoughts on today's session. The best photos and comments will be shared on @EU ASEAN channels and receive a surprise hamper from us. So isn't that really exciting? So do that. Maybe you can fill your Friday. And before the session ends, I just want to say that I definitely learned a lot, and I feel like it's so important to have very strong, inspirational women role models like you guys, like Ratna, Vivian, and Celeste. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for being here with us today. Celeste, Ratna, and Vivian, maybe you can share a few last words with us. Maybe Ratna?
Okay, first of all, thank you, Agnes, for inviting Safe and Fair to speak at this event. We're quite happy to share some of the work we're doing, and it's fantastic to hear Celeste and Vivian also speak. So for me, it was a pretty much a learning event as well. I'd just like to, just reiterate some of the things that we've been saying is that we're all actually part of this process of creating change in this region. We all have a role here to play. So, I do encourage all of us to kind of see how we can counter these traditional stereotypes or negative narratives that we have surrounding gender and migrant workers in this region. So I would leave on that note particularly, and to think where we can all step in and play our part.
How about you, Celeste?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think Vivian said one thing that was so important in the start of the session was that conversations are a unifying tool, and have as many conversations as you want, but just keep having conversations, keep talking about these issues, because the more you talk about this, the more people know about this, and the more people will feel like they need to do something about this. A lot of us are advocating, but not enough are, so just keep talking about it. Yeah.
Yes, we need to be loud about it, because as Ratna said, all of us are part of this change, and that's such a beautiful and empowering thing that we need to understand. So final words from you, Vivian?
Yes, I fully agree. And, having conversation to follow through from what Celeste is saying, pick a community, right? Pick a tribe. And I think, what Nadia's team and the EU ASEAN team has built such an incredible community for all of you, all of us to be conversing, right? To be talking to each other, to throw out ideas. It's this safe space. So keep this momentum as well beyond after the 2 days, right? Keep sharing all these thoughts. And, if you meet anyone interesting in this event, attendees or any of the speakers, continue this relationship, and I think it really goes a long way. Yeah.
Yes, it does. It really goes a long way. So we need to be loud. We need to continue this conversation. We need to continue this relationship, because all of us are part of this change for the better. Okay, I absolutely love that. And this will be the end of our session. Once again, thank you so much for being here. I wish everyone is healthy and safe, and goodbye.